to be like passionately in love with music, and after my experiences with the industry and so forth, and then looking at a lot of things that have taken place, and I think that a lot of people from the era have not been maybe as recognized as they should be, by the industry and the people that do that kind of thing.
Johnny Kemp lived a tragic life and was brutally murdered. His body was found floating face down in Montego Bay waters at 9:50 a.m. on April 16, 2015. Police ruled out foul play, but the contradicting stories about his final hours tell a different tale.
He said to me, "Little brother, I'm gonna make it. I really don't want to make it, but I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna be there."
The man behind Just Got Paid had traveled to Jamaica for a cruise performance he would never make, denied boarding for mysterious documentation issues that left him stranded in a foreign country.
When he got to Jamaica, he was stopped. And it was only because of a few words that he said that revoked him from getting on this ship.
What happened during those final 18 hours between his hotel check-in and his body's discovery remains one of music's most puzzling mysteries. So let's dive into the story of how a Bahamian teenager's American dream turned into a nightmare that ended in the waters of Jamaica. Johnny Kemp stood on the stage of a Nassau nightclub, sweat dripping down his 13-year-old face as adults twice his age watched him command the microphone like he'd been born holding it. The year was 1972, and while other kids his age were playing outside, Johnny was living a double life that would shape everything about his future. Born Jonathan Kemp Jr. on August 2, 1959, in Nassau, Bahamas, music wasn't just in his blood, it was his inheritance. His father, Jonathan Kemp Sr., had founded Kempalex Records and performed with the Confidential Club Orchestra, making the Kemp household a place where melody and rhythm were as common as breakfast conversation. But Johnny wanted more than his father's local success. Every night, he'd slip into those smoky clubs where tourists came to escape their ordinary lives, and he'd sing for them with a voice that seemed impossibly mature for his age. The tips weren't much, but the applause was intoxicating. Each performance taught him something new about holding an audience, about making strangers care about the emotions he was selling. The club owners loved him because he brought something different to their stages. Here was a kid who could sing Caribbean standards, American soul, and everything in between with equal conviction. Tourists would leave talking about the boy wonder they'd discovered, never knowing they'd just witnessed the early training of someone who would one day make millions of people move to his beat. By the time Johnny turned 16, he'd outgrown every stage Nassau had to offer. The island that had nurtured his talent was now too small to contain his ambitions. He'd started writing his own songs, crafting melodies that blended the Caribbean rhythms of his childhood with the American sounds that dominated the radio waves. The decision to leave everything behind wasn't easy, but Johnny knew that staying meant accepting limits he wasn't willing to accept. In 1979, when he was 20 years old, he packed his dreams and his voice into a suitcase and joined a band called Kinky Fox for the most important journey of his life. A one-way trip to Harlem, New York, where real careers were made or destroyed. Harlem in 1979 was nothing like the tourist-friendly clubs of Nassau. Johnny found himself in a world where everyone could sing, everyone had dreams, and most would never make it past the struggle. Kinky Fox had brought him to America, but the band itself was just another group of talented musicians trying to catch lightning in a bottle. The transition was brutal. In Nassau, Johnny had been special, the kid with the golden voice who could make tourists stop mid-conversation. In New York, he was just another hopeful with a Caribbean accent, competing against singers who'd been grinding in the city since birth. The confidence that had carried him through years of nightclub performances began to crack under the weight of constant rejection. Kinky Fox managed to release a single called So Different, a funky track that showcased their potential but failed to break through the noise of the music industry.
It's so different now with you.
The band members began drifting apart, each seeking their own path to survival in a city that demanded everything and promised nothing in return. But Johnny's time with Kinky Fox had connected him to a network of musicians who would change his life. Former bandmates found work with other groups, and Johnny discovered he had a skill that could pay the bills: session work. He could sing backup vocals, write songs for other artists, and blend his voice seamlessly into any production. The work was anonymous and poorly paid, but it was education. Johnny learned the mechanics of the music business from the inside, watching how hits were constructed, how producers thought, how record labels made decisions. He sang backup for the BB&Q band on their 1982 album All Night Long, co-writing several tracks that taught him the collaborative nature of professional songwriting. His work with the Italian-American group Change on their album Sharing Your Love brought him deeper into the post-disco world that was evolving into something new. He co-wrote Take You to Heaven, a track that showed his growing sophistication as a songwriter who understood both melody and market appeal. The session work was keeping him alive, but Johnny knew it wasn't his destination. Every night he'd return to his small apartment knowing he was capable of more than singing someone else's vision. The question was whether the industry would ever give him the chance to prove it. In 1985, Johnny's years of grinding finally paid off when Columbia Records offered him a solo deal. It was the validation he'd been working toward since leaving Nassau, but the pressure was immense. One album to prove he could be more than a session musician, more than a backup singer, more than another talented artist who never quite made it. His self-titled debut, Johnny Kemp, dropped in 1986, and for a moment, it looked like his American dream might actually work. The album reached number 36 on Billboard's Top Black Albums chart. Respectable for a debut, but far from the breakthrough success he needed. The single, Just Another Lover, co-written with the producer Kashif, climbed to number 14 on the Hot Black Singles chart and found traction on the dance charts.
'Cause I don't wanna be just another lover.
But Johnny knew that moderate success was often worse than complete failure in the music industry. Artists who almost made it were quickly forgotten, while those who failed spectacularly sometimes got second chances. He needed his next album to be something special, something that would separate him from the hundreds of talented R&B singers competing for attention. The answer came from an unexpected source. Keith Sweat, who was building his own career as a New Jack Swing pioneer, was offered an instrumental track by producer Teddy Riley. Sweat passed on it, deciding it wasn't quite right for his style. The track might have disappeared into the pile of unused beats that litter every producer's archive, but somehow it found its way to Johnny. When Johnny first heard that instrumental, he knew immediately what it needed. The beat was infectious, the kind of rhythm that made you move before you even realized you were dancing. But it needed lyrics that matched its energy, words that captured the feeling of freedom and celebration that the music demanded. Johnny locked himself in his apartment and wrote the song that would define his career. The concept was simple but universal. The euphoric feeling of getting paid after a week of hard work, the anticipation of weekend freedom, the pure joy of having money in your pocket and time to spend it. Just Got Paid wasn't trying to be deep or artistic. It was trying to be the soundtrack to every Friday afternoon in America.
Just got paid. It's Friday night.
When Johnny brought his finished version back to Teddy Riley, both men knew they had something special. The song captured lightning in a bottle, combining Johnny's Caribbean-influenced vocals with Riley's cutting-edge production in a way that felt both familiar and revolutionary. Just Got Paid exploded onto the airwaves in 1988 like a musical earthquake. The numbers told the story of a cultural phenomenon. Just Got Paid rocketed to #1 on the R&B chart and stayed there for 2 weeks, while simultaneously climbing to #10 on the Billboard Hot 100. The song sold over 1 million copies in the United States alone, earning Johnny his first and only Grammy nomination for Best R&B Song in 1989. But the real impact went beyond sales figures. Just Got Paid became embedded in American culture in a way that few songs achieve. It played in offices every Friday afternoon, in clubs every weekend, at parties where people needed an excuse to celebrate. The song's infectious hook and celebration of working-class achievement resonated with millions of people who saw their own lives reflected in Johnny's lyrics. The success transformed Johnny's entire world overnight. Suddenly, he was performing on television shows, doing interviews, and traveling the country for concerts where thousands of people sang his words back to him. The struggling session musician from Nassau had become a genuine pop star, living the American dream he'd chased since leaving the Caribbean. His album Secrets of Flying became a commercial success built on the strength of its mega hit. Another track, Dancin' With Myself, reached the top 5 on the R&B charts, proving that Just Got Paid wasn't a complete fluke. Johnny had found his sound, his audience, and his place in the New Jack Swing movement that was defining late 1980s popular music. Record executives were already talking about his next album, his next single, his next phase of career development. Magazine covers, endorsement deals, and movie soundtrack opportunities were all suddenly possible. Johnny Kemp was no longer a name in the credits. He was the name on the marquee. But success in the music industry is often temporary, and Johnny was about to learn how quickly the industry's attention can shift to the next new sound, the next promising artist, the next potential hit. The music industry's cruelest trick is how it makes yesterday's sensation feel forgotten almost overnight. By the early 1990s, Johnny discovered that having one massive hit could become a prison as much as a gateway. Everyone wanted him to recreate Just Got Paid, but the magic that had made that song special couldn't be manufactured on demand. His follow-up releases failed to capture the cultural lightning that had made him famous. Birthday Suit, featured on the soundtrack to the 1989 movie Sing, reached number 36 on the Billboard Hot 100, a respectable showing that would have thrilled most artists, but for Johnny, it felt like failure. When your career peak is number 1, anything less feels like falling. The music industry was evolving rapidly, leaving many New Jack Swing artists struggling to find their place in a landscape increasingly dominated by hip-hop and alternative rock. The sound that had made Johnny famous was beginning to feel dated, and younger artists were capturing the attention that had once been his.
Sort of dampened my love, as it were, you know, for.
Rather than disappear entirely, Johnny adapted. He became involved with Sugar Beats, a children's cover band where he performed alongside Sherry Goffin Condor, daughter of legendary songwriter Carole King. The group included future pop star Jesse McCartney among its young performers, and Johnny found unexpected satisfaction in mentoring the next generation of entertainers. His work with children's music led to other opportunities that kept him connected to the industry without the pressure of recreating his past success. He sang the theme song for PBS's Reading Rainbow series, bringing his voice to millions of children who knew him only as the man who made learning fun, not as the guy who had once topped the R&B charts.
Take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow.
Johnny also participated in various New Jack Swing reunion tours and nostalgia shows, performing Just Got Paid for audiences who remembered the song's heyday with fondness. These performances were steady work, but they also served as constant reminders that his career had become defined by one moment in time. The industry's treatment of legacy artists was often brutal. While newer stars commanded millions, veterans like Johnny were expected to be grateful for whatever opportunities came their way. But he maintained his dignity and professionalism, understanding that sustained success in entertainment requires adapting to circumstances beyond any artist's control. By 2015, Johnny Kemp had made peace with his place in music history. At 55, he was no longer chasing chart success or dreaming of comebacks. Instead, he had built a stable life with his wife, Deirdre Fisher Kemp, and their two sons, Jared and Jason. The family man who had once conquered the charts was now focused on different kinds of success. But the music industry has a way of calling its veterans back for one more round. The Tom Joyner Foundation Fantastic Voyage Cruise had become an annual celebration of R&B and hip-hop's golden eras, bringing together legendary artists for Caribbean performances that mixed nostalgia with genuine entertainment. For artists like Johnny, these cruises represented both steady income and the chance to perform for audiences who truly appreciated their contributions to music history. Johnny was scheduled to be part of a New Jack Swing segment alongside producer Teddy Riley, the man who had helped create his biggest hit.
He said to me, "Little brother, I'm gonna make it. I really don't want to make it, but I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna be there."
The reunion would have been meaningful for both artists, a chance to celebrate the music they had created together nearly 3 decades earlier. For Johnny, it was also an opportunity to perform Just Got Paid for fans who still considered it one of the greatest party anthems ever recorded. Christopher Powell, who had worked as Johnny's assistant for 3 years, helped coordinate the travel arrangements. The plan was simple: fly from New York's Kennedy Airport to Jamaica on Wednesday morning, board the cruise ship in Montego Bay, and perform as scheduled. Johnny was looking forward to the trip, both for the professional opportunity and the chance to perform in the Caribbean waters where his musical journey had begun. But as Johnny prepared for what should have been a routine performance cruise, none of them realized they were planning a trip that would end in tragedy. The documentation that would prevent him from boarding the ship was already in his travel bag, waiting to create the circumstances that would leave him stranded in a foreign country with no way to contact his family when trouble struck. The last conversation Powell had with Johnny before his departure was routine, confirming flight times, discussing the performance schedule, ensuring everything was in place for a successful trip. Neither man had any reason to suspect this would be their final conversation.
I feel really bad because he went out doing something and making the attempt to do.
Johnny's Wednesday morning flight from Kennedy Airport to Jamaica was uneventful, just another routine trip for an artist who had traveled countless times for performances. He arrived in Montego Bay expecting to board the Tom Joyner cruise ship that evening, ready to perform the songs that had defined his career for audiences who still appreciated the music of his era. But something went wrong at the boarding process. According to his assistant Christopher Powell, Johnny was denied entry to the cruise ship because he didn't have proper documentation, specifically a permanent residency card that cruise officials required. The exact nature of the documentation problem remains unclear, but the result was devastating. Johnny was left stranded in Montego Bay while the cruise ship departed without him.
When he got to Jamaica, he was stopped. And it was only because of a few words that he said that revoked him from getting the...
Other performers like Jennifer Hudson and Earth, Wind and Fire had boarded the ship successfully and performed that night before departing. Johnny should have been among them, performing Just Got Paid for a crowd that would have sung every word back to him. Instead, he found himself alone in a foreign country with no clear way to rectify the situation. Johnny checked into a hotel in Montego Bay that Wednesday night, probably hoping to resolve the documentation issue and catch up with the cruise at a later port. The hotel staff would later remember him as a polite guest who seemed frustrated but not distressed. He had his Bahamian passport with him, and there was no indication that he feared for his safety or anticipated any problems. Thursday morning brought a day of confusion and conflicting accounts. Other cruise ship passengers reported seeing Johnny walking along the rocky areas near the beach earlier that day. He appeared to be in good health and normal spirits, giving no indication of distress or unusual behavior. These sightings would later become crucial to the police investigation, but they also raise questions about what Johnny was doing in those final hours. At 9:50 a.m. on April 16, 2015, passers-by discovered Johnny's body floating face down in the waters off a Montego Bay beach. The hotel called Deirdre to inform her that her husband was dead, a phone call that shattered a family's world and launched a series of investigations that would raise more questions than they answered. The official investigation into Johnny Kemp's death concluded quickly, perhaps too quickly for a case involving so many contradictions. Jamaican police interviewed witnesses, examined the scene, and ruled out foul play, determining that Johnny had been walking on rocks near the beach, lost his balance, fell, hit his head, and drowned. Case closed, according to the authorities. But the official explanation left enormous gaps in the timeline that have never been satisfactorily filled. If Johnny was seen walking near the beach on Thursday morning, what had he been doing since checking into his hotel the previous night? Why was he alone in an area where tourists typically don't venture without guides? And how does a 55-year-old man in good health simply fall and drown in daylight hours without anyone witnessing the accident? The contradictory initial reports only added to the confusion. Early news accounts claimed Johnny had died aboard the cruise ship, possibly after falling in a restroom. When Reach Media, the cruise company, quickly corrected these reports and confirmed Johnny had never boarded their ship, it raised questions about where the false information had originated and why there had been such confusion about basic facts. Christopher Powell's account of the documentation problems that kept Johnny off the cruise ship also raises troubling questions. If Johnny was an experienced performer who had traveled internationally many times, why would he have arrived in Jamaica without proper documentation? The passport found on his body should have been sufficient for most travel purposes. So what additional documentation was required? And why hadn't anyone anticipated this problem? The timeline between Johnny's hotel check-in Wednesday night and his body's discovery Thursday morning remains a black hole of missing information. Hotel records might show when he left his room, but no one has publicly accounted for his activities during those crucial hours. Security cameras in the area might have captured his movements, but no such footage has ever been released. The music community's reaction to Johnny's death was one of genuine shock and sadness, but also suspicion about the circumstances.
Right now, Johnny Kemp was supposed to be on the stage.
The idea that such a person could simply disappear and die under mysterious circumstances felt wrong to people who had known him. 10 years later, Johnny Kemp's death remains officially solved, but practically mysterious. The Jamaican authorities satisfied themselves that no crime had been committed, but the gaps in the official account leave room for doubt about what really happened during those final 18 hours. Whether those questions will ever be answered depends on whether anyone with knowledge of Johnny's final day decides to break their silence. The man who had made millions of people celebrate their Friday night freedom had died alone on a Thursday morning in circumstances that still don't make complete sense. Perhaps that's the most tragic part of Johnny Kemp's story. Not just that he died young, but that the truth about his death remains as elusive as his attempts to recapture the magic of just got paid. Anyway, that's it for the video, folks. Bye.